Hey guys, before we dive in today, we just wanted to put a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about some aspects of mental health, including suicide. And so if this is a subject matter that you're not ready to deal with, we just suggest you skip this one.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Trekkies. This is Katy.
This is Sam.
And it's another beautiful day in the Ozarks.
It is. It's chilly February day. And we are marching our way right on into spring. Not quite there yet, but we're starting to see signs of life out there.
I'm so ready for it, too.
So this time of year, I don't know about you guys, but I know a lot of folks kind of can start feeling the seasonal blues and whatnot kick in. We're ready to have more sunshine and more outdoor times in our lives. So we thought we would take this opportunity to tackle a subject that we've been wanting to get into for a while, but we wanted to be sure to give it its due diligence, and that is mental health and well-being.
Yeah, it's an intimidating one to tackle a little bit, so we're going to do our best.
Right. We've spent some time researching and trying to really explore the connection between nature and mental health. So we hope that some of the info that we put out there in this podcast might be helpful for some of you, inspiring perhaps.
Yes.
As we all know, there's a bit of a mental health crisis going on in our society. I think there's probably not a person out there that hasn't experienced or knows someone that has experienced, a time of mental unrest. According to the CDC, currently 20% of all Americans are dealing with a mental health issue. And even more, over 50% of people will deal with a mental health problem at some point in their life. And I would venture to guess that number is way higher than 50%.
That's huge.
It is. In 2020, the CDC reports that there was one death by suicide every 11 minutes. That's almost 46,000 people died in 2020. And this is just a crazy statistic to me. 1.2 million people attempted suicide in 2020. So obviously, we've all heard the news. We see this stuff all the time. People are struggling mentally. Our kids are struggling. Adults are struggling. This isn't really new information for anyone, but it doesn't change the fact that these problems are increasing, and people often don't see a way out or see any clarity on how they're going to find recovery or healing. I think part of the problem also is that a stigma still exists surrounding mental health. There is misinformation. There's just a lack of understanding. There is still probably a strong prejudice against those with mental issues. And while this does often come from others, self-stigma is incredibly common. Mental illness is often seen in this negative light, not only by others, but also by ourselves. So that can make us afraid or ashamed to reach out for help, or even have a difficult time recognizing or accepting signs of mental unwellness in oneself.
That's a really good point.
So we want to dig into that a little bit. An increasing number of studies are showing us the benefits of spending time in nature when it comes to our mental health. And so we've done some research, and we've just find that the connection and the possibility there is really exciting. I will say too, in the middle of all this research, I was introduced to the term of eco-psychology, which is kind of, turns out, my bread and butter. And so what eco-psychology is, it explores the relationship as humans with the natural world. And I just think that that's wonderful that it's kind of its own subset at this point.
Me too. All of that in mind, yes, I think that we all are kind of aware that our environment can have a huge effect on our overall mood, our thoughts, and our well-being. So as Sam said, there's kind of this growing body of research that shows that a natural environment has a positive impact on those things. There's also studies kind of contrasting that are showing a correlation between the rise of the percentage of population living in urban areas and the rise in mental health issues such as anxiety and depression. So being around nature and living things doesn't just make us feel good. If you dig into the research, it can actually change our physiology and create equilibrium in our brain chemistry, and a balanced brain is able to operate more effectively and productively. So this idea that nature has a direct effect on our wellness has been around for a long time. I'm talking BC, y'all. So Plato in 360 BC claimed, understanding the body is impossible without an understanding of nature as a whole. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said in 460 BC, nature is the physician of diseases, and also spoke on the necessity of airs, waters, and places for physical and mental well-being. Ancient Roman texts suggest there are health benefits to countryside and green spaces. In a more spiritual sense, Buddha around the 6th century BC said that to gain enlightenment, meditation should be attuned to nature. Gardens were prescribed at monasteries in the 1200s, not only for food, but for recreation in the open air to aid the recovery of the sick and to preserve health and improve those fatigued by their spiritual studies. Even in early America, there was an illness, I'm probably going to say this wrong, known as neurasthenia, with symptoms of depression, anxiety, insomnia, and migraines, which was often cured with nature, or as they put it, experiences in pleasant rural scenery. They called it the West Cure because they sent sufferers, and when I say sufferers, it was only men. I feel like women probably, they just didn't acknowledge it, but they would send men west to work on ranches in the open range. And some of these men are pretty well known, like Walt Whitman and Teddy Roosevelt.
Interesting.
So anyway, this information has been around for a while, and now we just have a larger body of scientific support for what it seems like we've instinctively known all along. So like the theory of biophilia that comes from biologist Edward Wilson describes our innate and genetically determined affinity with our natural world.
Interesting.
So I feel like we're just kind of reiterating things that have been around for a very long time.
Right, but now they're being studied, they're being put to the test, more or less.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So I also read the biophilia theory, which I find fascinating and truly resonates with me. I read about a couple of other theories that suggest nature has these mental healing type abilities. One such is just the stress reduction theory, which is pretty self-explanatory in the name. Another theory that I read a lot about is the attention restoration theory, which basically states that spending time in the wilderness, in the outdoors, kind of stokes almost a curiosity, and a gentle awareness begins growing, and it helps improve concentration and just general awareness in your life, which is, I don't know, pretty cool. Anyway, all these theories, they're not really contradictory. And in fact, if anything,
They kind of complement each other.
They do. They really all do. And they all, at least for me, ring pretty true. So
yeah, I found that to be true too. Like, it's fun to hear it expressed scientifically. Something that you sort of feel anyways.
Right, something you kind of feel in your bones.
Yeah.
And turns out there's starting to be this growing body of work supporting these innate feelings. So pretty interesting. I like seeing all this research happening, and I think that it's only going to continue just to grow, because I really feel like we're just almost scratching the surface as far as like putting these theories into practice. It's just really now starting to become something that people, you know, acknowledge outside of the outdoor rec world, you know.
Right. And outside of maybe cultures where it's a part of their spirituality.
Right.
A little more.
Yeah. So in general, we know that spending time in nature is good for our health. I think it would be hard to argue that. But like we said, many studies are increasingly supporting these benefits. First of all, any exposure to nature, including just passive exposure, offers health benefits. And I think that's important to make known, that you don't have to be an intense backpacker to enjoy these benefits.
Right.
Just spending time in natural areas are going to help. A study published by the Journal of Happiness reports that those that have a stronger relationship with nature experience more personal growth in their personal life. A 2019 study led by Matthew White found that 120 minutes per week spent in nature is associated with good health and well-being, but you had to reach that 120-minute mark, which is kind of interesting.
So nature also seems to have a lot of significance in our formative years, and studies are showing that it plays almost as big a role in the development of self as your parents or your siblings. So to be disconnected then from nature is sort of like being disconnected from a part of yourselves. And some of these studies are also showing that children who don't have this exposure to nature in their formative years, they really struggle with imagination in nature. And by that, I mean that like when they do go out into nature, they don't really know how to engage with it.
Interesting.
So I found that kind of interesting.
Kind of sad.
It is sad.
To be honest. Yeah, I found just tons of research supporting the idea that nature during developmental phases is very important for our children. There's studies that suggest green spaces around school and around dwellings are associated with better cognitive development and better self-control in young people. In youth with comorbid substance abuse and mental health issues, wilderness treatment programs have been shown to be highly successful as opposed to treatments per usual. And there's several studies that show that these types of outdoor wilderness experiences improve mental well-being in all youth in general, whether they are struggling with, substance abuse issues and mental health issues or not. Spending time in the outdoors can, increase the feeling of well-being for everyone, even those that don't identify as having a problem.
That's amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and present a little bit of information from a study that I read called The Levels of Nature and Stress Response. It's a very beefy boy, and I'm definitely going to link it so that you can find the actual study and so that you can see, credit where credit is due. I did not write down the names of all of the scientists involved in this because I didn't want to get derailed from the main purpose, but I will absolutely link that resource. So the background to this particular study was that a growing number of studies were showing that visiting green spaces and being exposed to natural environments can reduce psychological stress. So the question they were asking was, are activities engaged in natural environments more or less beneficial at reducing stress when compared to those done in more urban settings? So they examined this from 3 different levels of nature and collected the data from 3 different sites. So one site represented wilderness. They described it as having wilderness-like characteristics. One site represented a municipal park where elements of nature were present, but there was also a little bit of human presence. And then the third site represented a built environment or an indoor facility. So the biophysical markers that they used to generate data in this study were cortisol, which is our stress hormone involved in our fight or flight response. The primary function of cortisol is the redistribution of energy in glucose form to high priority parts of the body like the heart or the brain. The second one was alpha amylase, which is an enzyme found in our saliva. It has a lot of uses. Its primary one is breaking down starch and glycogen, also involved in defense against bacteria. So this is secreted when our sympathetic nervous system is activated, which often happens as a response to stress or perceived threats. So the point being that it's quickly breaking down starches into easily accessible energy, which can then be distributed to the parts of our body involved in fight or flight. So there's kind of a theme here in those measures. Their psychological measure was basically a pre- and post-visit perceived stress questionnaire, which they used to measure 4 different factors related to stress: worries, tension, joy, and demands. And the participants just answered on a scale of 1 to 4, ranging from I almost never feel like this to I usually feel like this. So some things that stood out within the study that were included in the background portion were attention restoration theory, which Sam mentioned earlier, that proposes natural environmental settings have particular properties that promote restoration from attention fatigue, which is my new favorite phrase, by the way. I'm probably going to use that from now on. There was also psychoevolutionary theory, which is that natural environments are effective at reducing stress levels because they offer specific attributes that our species viewed as having survival qualities, so like water, open space. And then there was the phylogenetic perspective, or the evolutionary development perspective, which is that since we developed in natural environments, these types of settings will be more therapeutic than built environments. There was a ton more to this study, but basically the results of the study indicated that the location with the highest level of nature or wilderness had the greatest effect on reducing levels of stress as measured by the biometric and psychometric data. So the study is really fascinating. Again, highly encourage you to read the whole thing.
It's interesting. I found, a separate but very similar study, and it was conducted by Gregory Bratman, who has done a lot of research in hiking and spending time outside and mental health. So in this particular study, participants were to spend either 90 minutes walking in a natural area or 90 minutes walking in a more urban area. The group that walked in a more natural area saw improvements in their mental state with less rumination and less neural activity in parts of the brain that are associated with stress, which is pretty fascinating, but I thought that this was even more so. The urban walkers did not see any type of improvements, but they did not see any increase in these symptoms either. So while the natural walkers did see these kind of stress symptoms decrease, the urban walkers didn't see any decrease, but they didn't see any increase either. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that's interesting to me.
It's like it kind of stabilized them.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I just thought that was a good point to make, though, that it's not necessarily that urban is always bad. Urban environments are always bad. Just that natural environments are better for us.
Yeah. Huh. I love that.
And that's just one study and, one suggestion, but it's interesting to ponder.
I feel like there's a t-shirt there somehow. Like, urban isn't bad, but natural is better.
Yeah.
It sounds like one.
We're not trying to hate on the urban areas, but...
So before we get into talking a little bit more about like hiking specific interactions with nature, I just kind of want to talk about nature as a full sensory experience.
Yeah.
So vision is our most dominant sense, and most of the research from a sensory aspect has focused on the visual aspect of nature experiences. I almost didn't write anything down for vision because I was like, well, that's kind of self-explanatory. But it was interesting anyway. So views of nature are shown to be restorative, but research hasn't really pinned down like which aspects or why. There are studies suggesting that it's a variety of elements: the colors, the shapes of the vegetation, the visual variety, curves, hue diversity, and lack of straight lines. So it sounds like it's kind of all of it. One very interesting thing I came across was kind of talking about fractal dimensions and complexity. So when we look at a landscape, our eye tends to be drawn to the horizon. The fractal complexity of that horizon is basically how many times it could be divided into patterns or shapes, and that does have an impact on the overall effect. So they found that horizons with fractal dimensions of about 1.3 are usually the most preferred, and that with those they found heightened alpha wave activity. From what I understood, that's sort of like the brain activity that they associate when they're looking for physiological markers of calm.
Okay.
So I found that interesting, and I should have written down some examples of these types of horizons, but I kind of, when I was listening to this information, was picturing it as maybe a horizon that has sort of some open space, but that's maybe sort of outlined by, trees or... Mm-hmm. So I found that kind of interesting. The second one I'll talk about is scent, and mostly what I want to talk about is terpenes because I'm kind of obsessed with them. So terpenes are organic aromatic compounds that are produced by certain plants, and they have different properties depending on the plant. Inhaling them can have a positive effect on our brain chemistry. So when we measure our physiological and psychological responses to these scents, we find that they bring about calm. They reduce stress, balance out cortisol levels, calm anxiety, reduce blood pressure, and more. So pinene, if you think about the scent of a pine forest, there's a lot of research on this particular one. Tests on people in labs have shown that they lower heart rate, they increase their sense of calm, their alpha brainwave activities increased, so their physiological response is basically of calming and relaxation. So they've also specifically tested pinene on babies through measuring their heart rate and found them more relaxed. And the reason that they did this is that association can have kind of a big impact on the research. And so this particular study being on babies pointed towards the effect having no ties to prior experiences or associations with the scent. So Japanese cypress or hinoki oil has the terpene cedral. They did a test on 20 Japanese men where they locked them in a hotel for 3 nights. Just kidding. They were not locked in there. But anyways, they stayed in a hotel for 3 nights with oil diffused into the air. And then they measured their blood, urine, and blood pressure. By the end of 3 nights, they found they had lower blood pressure, they had lower adrenaline, and they had very highly elevated levels of natural killer cells, which are the cells that attack viruses and cancer. Of course, we can't conclusively say that they fight against cancer, but this does point to them enhancing our immune system.
Yeah.
Further studies have showed that this elevated level of natural killer cells in people that have walked in the forest or been exposed actually lasts for 7 days. So it's not really an in and out situation. It does kind of stay with you.
Wow.
Limonene is another being tested in clinical studies for their ability to fight cancer cells, in particular breast cancer. And what I find most fascinating about these compounds is that if you go into the forest, you're going to find them at their highest levels of concentration between 3 and 6 feet off the ground. So they're right at nostril height.
Wow, that is so cool. That is super fascinating.
So natural sounds can have a calming and restorative effect on us as well. Our auditory systems are sensitive to sounds that are most important to our survival and reproduction. So natural sounds are complex and informational, meaning they provide us with information on species, season, and temporality, and it's very likely that we're attuned to these cues naturally. So an aspect of attention restoration theory, which keeps popping up, is that restorative environments give us information. And so these studies are suggesting that it's plausible nature sounds with their richness and information could contribute to the overall restorative properties of nature.
Talking about sound, I found an interesting study. It was published in 2018 in the Psychonomic Bulletin and Review Journal. And this study showed that listening to natural sounds in general improve cognitive functioning. So I think that there's evidence that supports that all of these sensory experiences are, pretty good for us.
That is amazing. I love anything that improves cognitive functioning, frankly.
I know. I could use some more improvement in cognitive functioning, especially when I'm trying to podcast, it seems.
Same. So I did write down a few other things. A lot of these studies were overlapping, so my notes were sort of a mess, but some things that stood out to me were that water sounds seem to be more effective in terms of increasing positive outlook or joy, while bird sounds were best for lowering stress. So in one study with 7,500 participants, their research kind of confirmed what we already talked about providing relief from stress and mental fatigue. Participants listened to landscape sounds from a wide range of environments. They also listened to wildlife sounds. And something interesting that stood out about this research was that when no wildlife sounds were present, the positive psychological benefits actually reduced.
Really?
So even though landscape itself had positive effects, landscape with the absence of wildlife seemed to have less of a positive effect. And they didn't really know why. One of their trains of thought was that maybe it's sort of like a hit on people's maybe fears about climate change and maybe species being eradicated or...
That's interesting. I wonder why.
Sound is also very tied to association or place attachment. I think actually all of the senses we're talking about are. So association can also affect whether or not or to what extent you experience restorative benefits. So in one study, for example, they found that you may experience more physiological and psychological benefits when exposed to bird songs that you recognize versus ones that you don't or that aren't native to your area. I found that super fascinating.
Wow.
There was also a study where they played white noise for their test group and then told half of the group that it was water and half that it was a road in the distance. And those told that it was water responded more positively and recovered more quickly from stress than the other half.
Wow.
So I found that kind of funny and interesting.
Yeah. I'm pondering that. Like, what does that mean? The power of suggestion also.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
So touch, despite being the first sense that we develop in utero, is really underappreciated in these studies. Most of the research related to touch is about touching pets or animals, and we're not here to encourage you to try to touch any creature that you encounter in the woods. I mean, good luck trying to catch that chipmunk, but...
Right. Probably shouldn't.
So we're not gonna talk about that. There is some pretty limited literature out there about the benefits of hands-on nature experiences. It's mostly in relation to nature or forest schools where children play and learn outdoors. There's some very limited research on the health and well-being effects of touch, like grass under your feet. So I guess that's where the saying, go touch grass, comes from. Water on your skin, wind on your skin. Overall, there's a huge gap in the research here. But along that lines, I do want to talk a little bit about sunshine, because in my opinion, that's touch, right?
Right, yeah, I see that.
So besides the most familiar aspect of it producing vitamin D, I wanted to touch on some other things that it does. So sunshine also produces beta endorphin, which is a hormone that is released into our bloodstream and makes us feel happy when it reaches our brain. And when I say happy, I'm talking about opioid level happy, because it follows the same biological pathways as addictive substances.
Ooh.
I found this really fascinating and super easy to believe, because I feel like laying out in sunshine is one of the most wonderful feelings in the world. So it also boosts serotonin and energy, promotes calm, focus, and positivity. It regulates our circadian rhythms by teaching our bodies when to increase and decrease melatonin. So if we can get outside when it's bright out, it actually helps set us up for a better night's sleep. It regulates melatonin in general, which lowers our stress reactivity. And it does a lot of other things. It upregulates a ton of different compounds in our body, most of which are mainly beneficial for our physical health, but I feel like good physical health is setting us up for good mental health.
Right, it's absolutely connected.
And so as an aside, this is not necessarily mental health related, but I just thought it was super interesting that our diet has a direct correlation to our vulnerability to sun damage. So our diet can provide us different compounds like antioxidants that actually provide sun protection, and a lack of these elements in our diet makes us more prone to sun damage.
Interesting.
Which I thought was interesting, and I thought I'd throw it out there because if we're thinking about sun being really beneficial, like obviously we still need to be careful going out there.
Right, but there's times a day that you can safely take in sunshine without much sun protection, like early in the mornings and whatnot. So there's ways to...
I love early morning sun.
Get in your sunshine without putting yourself at risk.
So a couple other sensory aspects that I wanted to discuss. I wasn't really sure where to put them. One of these is phytoncides. I may be mispronouncing that. This is an antimicrobial volatile compound emitted by plants. They permeate the air in natural environments. We ingest them through inhalation, but we don't really smell or taste them. These guys are studied extensively in Japan. So 2 kinds of phytoncides have been found to be antimicrobial. 3 have been found to increase immune system activity in vitro. Overall, they're believed to decrease stress and increase relaxation. In rats, they've decreased spontaneous activity and reduced cardiovascular response to the stress of restraint. And in mice, they prolong sleep, decrease anxiety, and depress the central nervous system.
Wow.
So another one I'm going to touch on, again, real quickly, are air ions, which are basically air particles that can have either a positive or negative charge. They're formed when energy detaches an electron from one gas molecule and attaches it to another. This energy comes from a ton of different sources. Some that stood out to me were waterfalls, thunder, and UV light. So they're abundant in natural places like forests and especially by waterfalls. They're suggested as one of the potential players in the physiological and mood benefits of natural spaces. They have the ability to clean the air, which in itself could be a benefit. And built environments tend to have ion depletion. So when we're inside, there's usually as little as 10% of the air ion concentration as there is in the outdoors. Vegetation strongly influences the abundance of air ions. Plants produce them directly, but they also draw up radon in the groundwater, which is another source. Mountains and forests have the highest level, rural and coastal sites have moderate levels, and then of course urban have the lowest levels. Air ions are believed to exert a biological influence, but experimentation hasn't really allowed for any firm conclusions to be drawn. So there's both positive air ions and negative air ions, but we're focusing on negative air ions because they're the ones with the positive benefits. So
it's like one of those opposite things.
It is. Yeah. I'm like, can you just not make it that way? But that's the way it is. So high density of negative air ions are used as a treatment for seasonal affective disorder.
Wow.
Non-seasonally depressed individuals showed a 27% to 55% improvement in depression, mood disturbance, and anger during the first 30 minutes of administration. This was in a placebo-controlled study. Anxiety was decreased in 80% of patients with anxiety syndrome, and it has positive effects in many aspects of physical health as well. In animal studies, rats showed an increase in learning and performance and a decrease in fear with negative ion exposure. So increased levels of negative air ion are shown to stabilize mood, increase vigor and friendliness, increase alertness and performance, decrease tension, increase reaction time, energy, and ease of concentration.
Wow.
I wasn't sure whether I even wanted to include this or not, but I just found it really interesting. And also, like, some of these things, like vigor, alertness, and performance felt like pretty relative to actually moving your body outside through hiking or backpacking. So I thought I would throw it in.
It's interesting. I would love to see more research on air ions. You know, honestly, I haven't read that much about them. That's super fascinating.
I would like to too, because one of my big questions, and I didn't pursue it because I was trying to stay on task, but like where they said that they administered it and the participant showed, like, what did they do? How do you do that?
I know, I'm kind of wondering the same thing, and I'm thinking I'm going to have to ask you to send me all of these studies because I want to read about them all now.
Yeah, I think I kept all of these tabs open. So
I did too. I have a lot of tabs going with all this. Super interesting. It's something I would love to see more research behind.
Me too. And the terpenes in the phytoncides. I have come across these before, these compounds that plants release that are so good for us. I think they're kind of a huge aspect of the research in Japan about forest bathing, or in relation to forest bathing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to touch on this idea while we're talking about kind of this full sensory experience, or, you know, really more breaking down the senses and how each one can find benefit, perhaps, in Mother Nature. So in Japan, there's this concept called Shinrin Yoku, which is forest bathing. And to simply describe forest bathing, I would say is just to go and be in the forest and to allow yourself a variety of sensory experiences while you're there, and to take note and to try to probably sink in and enjoy all of these different sensory experiences. There's studies coming out of Japan about the practice of Shinrin Yoku, or forest bathing, and that they're seeing decreased stress levels in participants, a strengthened immune system in participants. So it really just supports everything that Katy's saying here about these different sensory experiences can offer so much benefit.
I like that phrase, forest bathing.
Yeah, it's just kind of the idea of going and setting and being there. Maybe something I struggle with, being still.
I do too, and it's funny because I did come across another study. I didn't really write much down on it, but it kind of alluded to how you don't receive as many benefits just from being outside, but that the greater benefits come from actually being present and engaging with nature. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And I feel like that kind of ties back to some of the research you mentioned earlier as well.
Being intentional.
Right.
And not being, let's face it, stuck in our heads.
Right.
And being 1,000 miles away of where our body is. Because I struggle with that sometimes.
Me too.
So being intentional, being present, it's something I want to work on in all facets of my life. But it's pretty inspiring to actually be reading all this evidence that shows how this intentional time spent in nature, how much benefit we can get from it. It's exciting.
It really is. I had so much fun even just reading about it.
Oh, me too.
But it was kind of funny. Like, there were some points where the research was starting to get to be, like, overwhelming. And I had to kind of tell myself, like, hey, you're feeling stressed. What does the research tell you to do? Yeah. I'm like, all right, I'm going to walk away and go outside for a minute.
I love that. So now that we've discussed the possible benefits that we could all, achieve by spending intentional time in nature, whatever that looks like, whether it's active or passive, I'd like to talk a little bit more specifically about hiking and backpacking and, what specific benefits that we have found through those practices and benefits that researchers have found through the practice of hiking and backpacking.
I'm excited about this. I just want to rub my palms together.
Yeah. Katy's like wiggling with excitement. Okay, so I wanted to talk about a few different studies that really support the idea that hiking, specifically hiking, provides improvements in mental well-being. One of the researchers I talked about earlier, Gregory Bratman, and I talked about his urban versus natural area walking study and how the natural surroundings really provided participants with a feeling of less stress and whatnot. Bratman's got a lot of good studies out talking about hiking, which is kind of fascinating that he's devoted so much energy and time to it. So in more than one of Bratman's studies, just time and time again, he finds that hiking improves cognitive performance, it decreases stress levels, all of these things that we're talking about, he is finding to be a benefit of specifically hiking. So that's exciting to me. I don't know about you guys, but another really interesting research study I read about was led by Ruth Ann Atchley. This was published in the Public Library of Science. If anybody is just dying to go look it up right this second, I guess it will be in our show notes. But anyway, so they immersed these groups of newbie hikers in nature for 4 days. And then afterwards, they performed tests that they had performed pre-hike and these types of like creativity tests. And test scores were 50% higher in creativity after the hikes as opposed to before the 4-day hike, which I thought 50% is a sizable amount.
That's incredible.
Right. And there is, I can't remember what it's called. There's kind of a generalized creativity test, and that's what they performed on them. And that one just kind of blew me away.
So we just need to be hiking before every single podcast, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it makes me feel like I just need to be hiking all the time.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a pretty remarkable increase, 50% in creativity.
Wow.
Another, sad but important study was done in 2012. It's a Scandinavian study. All the participants had attempted suicide at least once previously and had current feelings of hopelessness. They spent several days hiking, and these participants saw a remarkable decrease in suicide ideation, which is really just amazing.
Wow.
And I'm not going to sit here and say that, hiking is going to prevent something like that happening, but there is research showing that it could help.
It's amazing.
It could give someone hope, So that just kind of blew me away, and I found it to be just very inspiring and hope-giving in and of itself.
Yeah, that's some powerful research. I didn't really come across as many studies that were hiking or backpacking specific, I think it was probably just that my brain really got off on different paths.
Well, there's not as much like hiking specific research, you know.
In general, I feel like from everything that we've talked about, we know that, you know, hiking or backpacking is immersing you in nature. So we are getting these benefits that we discussed, but it's also that actual motion. And we know that motion has a lot of physical benefits, but also benefits for our health and well-being, our mental health.
Yeah, I thought about that earlier when we were talking about some of the body processes and whatnot. You know, we know that exercise in general is good for our brains. You know, exercise increases blood flow to our entire body, including our brains, and that's always a good thing. There are studies that show that doing challenging activities while exercising can improve the plasticity of our brains and other cognitive abilities as well. So basically what that's saying is, you know, as opposed to just like walking on a treadmill fairly mindlessly, someone like a hiker is constantly multitasking while they're exercising. So they're using their brains to navigate, observing, stepping over things, following maps, considering surroundings, making plans, all while actually getting that physical exercise. And that in and of itself, that multitasking is good for our brains as opposed to just doing something mindless and more stationary.
That is really cool.
I mean, it makes sense, right?
And like, I feel like the benefits are pretty extreme to be like worth noting that they're more beneficial, because even just general exercise, like you said, does have those cognitive, the clarity, concentration, memory, like so many different positive effects. So to see that it's like even more heightened during an activity like hiking makes me be like, oh.
It makes sense though.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like super.
I mean, I would say any exercise, like I'm never going to discourage anyone.
Right.
Like go get it. It's good for your brain. But I really enjoyed that, reading about that research, and it makes sense to me at the same time because as a hiker, you really are multitasking all the time.
All the time.
Got a lot going on upstairs at times when you're trying to figure out, you know, your course of action and whatnot. So anyway, I thought that was exciting.
It is exciting, and it makes me feel kind of validated, like as a backpacker and a hiker.
Good job, us.
Yay! Go us. So some other benefits of motion in general that really stood out to me when I was thinking in terms of backpacking were that it helps cultivate emotional resilience. I feel like we've both kind of talked about this just anecdotally a lot throughout our different episodes. So that stood out to me. Also, working on posture, breathing, and rhythm can create changes in your brain that reduce stress, depression, anxiety, and increase the feeling of well-being. And meditative movement specifically has been shown to alleviate depressive symptoms. So I found these very relevant to my own experience because the idea behind meditative movement is to pay close attention to your bodily sensations as you move. And this is a ridiculously huge aspect of my backpacking experience. I feel like you're constantly, and you have to because you want to avoid injury, you know, and you want to kind of make sure that your experience is going to be, you know, not detrimental to your physical health. So you are paying attention to those sensations. I do also tend to constantly adjust my posture, breathing, and rhythm just to try to make myself more comfortable throughout the day. So I could see, of course, this is speculation, but I could see getting those benefits as well. I see it. I feel so much more attuned to my body when I'm backpacking than a lot of the other time of my life. Just more connected and listening to her and I see that. That's interesting. Something else that I didn't necessarily pursue research on, but that I think bears.
What about bears?
It's bears.
Bears have great mental
health.
Have
great mental health benefits. So another aspect of backpacking I wanted to bring up in relation to mental health is just the sense of community that you're going to encounter, not just with backpacking, but like backpacking, hiking, rock climbing. These all kind of come with a community. And so I do think that having this sense of community and belonging could also be kind of a key component in, not a key component, but a component of the positive impact that it has on mental health.
I think so. Absolutely.
So I don't have much else to say on that besides just what I said, but
No, I read about some different programs like for veterans and things like that they take them out backpacking. And yes, it's a course about being in nature and experiencing that, but a lot of it is about building relationships with others and creating safe spaces for people to spend time communicating honestly and whatnot. And I think that is absolutely a part of it if you want it to be. You know?
I mean, I guess if you hate all people and you only want to be isolated, that's available as well.
Right. True.
But I don't know. I think, well, you spoke a little bit in one of our episodes. You talked about your experience with going and learning rock climbing a little bit. And I feel like one of the things that stood out when you had that conversation was that you just were really struck by this sense of being around like minds and sharing this love of the outdoors.
Yes.
And I do think it's powerful.
Sometimes it's hard to find your people.
Yeah.
You know, or just to find people that have same interests as you is not always easy, especially if you don't live near that many other people, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that is a big part of it. And, you know, in my own anecdote here in this small section, I've written about my own personal experiences. That is something that I touch on for myself is, you know, hiking provides a chance to seek solitude for those of us that desire that. But it also provides an opportunity to build camaraderie with others, to feel a part of something, of a community. Or, you know, in my own personal case, I feel like it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I go out for solitude, but I also go out to connect. So I don't think they're exclusive from one another.
Yeah.
And to continue on, this is the section of my notes I titled Testify.
Hallelujah.
Testify.
Praise. Okay, sorry.
You know, personally, after becoming a backpacker, spending time outside, even before really becoming a backpacker, just spending time in nature, it's always given me a feeling of peace and of clarity that I don't really find anywhere else. And I think I've probably said that in a previous episode, but for me, clarity is often found in the trees. And I feel like I absolutely have found healing while backpacking and while hiking. You know, experiences may vary, but it has helped me to feel stronger and more resilient, both mentally and physically. It's improved my self-confidence and really garnered a new understanding and stronger appreciation for my physical form and what it can do, you know, which in turn has really improved my self-image. So, you know, that's a quick summary of what kind of benefits I feel like I've received from the natural world and spending time in it. But really, I could write probably a 10-page paper about it. Yeah. But it's important to me, and it's healing and spiritual, and it's just really nice to be finding all this research that supports something that my heart feels.
Yeah. I think that's why this research was so exciting. Because I love science, but I also love things that speak to my heart, and it's like, it was both.
When the two come together, chef's kiss.
So I did try to not write 10 pages on so 10 pages on why I love nature. I did try to hone in on
a volume of books.
Seriously, we could. We talked a little bit earlier about the benefits coming from engaging versus just being out there. And that's what kind of stood out in my mind, because I think that's what it is for me. It's that presence and the way that I find myself paying attention to detail more. And I think that that's just things that I did do more as a kid when I was outside. I used to play outside for hours and hours and be totally entertained by everything out there, observing the tiniest of details. And so I think that when I go out backpacking, I'm so immersed in nature that it takes me back to that child part of me in a sense.
Same.
Which I need, because adulthood is really freaking hard.
Yeah.
Honestly. And like you spoke a lot about clarity, and I think clarity is something that I'm always chasing, because for me, being an adult just comes with all of this stuff that likes to just sit in my brain all the time. And it's not necessarily bad stuff. Sometimes it's just the mundane little thing, like aspects of being a functioning adult human person in society. So getting out in nature, especially backpacking, because it is this very continuous, uninterrupted stretch of time, it's the perfect catalyst for me to find clarity and reconnect with that childlike sense of wonder.
Yes.
I did want to say that it's always a different experience. It always provides something different. I've gotten healing. I've gotten the empowerment. I've had some pretty powerful reflections out there. It seems to be the perfect space for things to come to the surface that I thought were dead and buried. And they're like, no, hi, we're still here. And I think it's because I cannot run or hide or distract out there. I just kind of have to be with it. Another aspect of presence is that is really hard to cultivate in day-to-day life, because when we're here, we have so many things on our plate that we have to do. And I was just kind of thinking about it and realized that a lot of my anxiety has nothing to do with the present moment. It's always about a moment that's already passed, something that I'm agonizing over or embarrassed about, or like, oh, I could have done that differently, or something in the future that I'm already pre-worrying about.
Right.
And so I think that's a big aspect of backpacking for me, is that it is more suited to existing in the present moment. So I do tend to find myself less anxious about those things. But I also want to say that it's not like that all the time. And that doesn't happen like immediately when you go out on trail. Right. Suddenly you're present. Like it does take time to get to that place. And also sometimes for me, I don't know about you, but for me it flows in cycles of a thought surfacing, me dealing with it, kind of getting rid of it, my mind quieting, finding that sense of presence, and then enjoying it for a while, and then maybe it starts all over again with a different thought. So
same. I think that's normal.
So, I did also just want to say that it doesn't have to be a profound experience to have a profound effect on my mental health. And I wanted to touch on this because I do think it can almost become addictive to kind of go out and chase the type of high that you experienced on a previous trip. Maybe you did find some pretty powerful healing, or maybe you did feel super empowered. But that doesn't
you're bringing this up, by the
always,
way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It doesn't always happen. There's not always going to be some huge epiphany out there. No. But I do consistently find that I'm more present and I'm paying attention. And those in and of themselves are really powerful tools for my heart.
Right. The benefits are happening whether you're having these clarity moments or not. You're still getting benefit. It doesn't all have to be a breakthrough.
And this is something, I'm mainly preaching to myself because I do struggle with expectations sometimes going into a trip. And so
Same.
I got to remind myself of that. There's a lot of magic just in that shift from noise to quiet inside my own mind, because once my mind is able to become quiet, then that awareness of the nature around me can grow. And I think that this awareness, it feels like settling into a rhythm with nature. So it feels like becoming a part of nature again instead of existing separately from it.
Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about.
That is definitely what it's all about for me. One of my favorite things in nature, and this honestly has been something that, I don't know, maybe it has some personal significance to me, but I always come across these little downy feathers caught on tree branches, and they're always just so white and fluffy, and I love them. I love them.
Like, makes your heart sing.
It does. And, just when it comes to wildlife, like noticing the markings on different creatures like moths or butterflies or turtles' faces. Like, I just feel like being out in nature and spending all this time just makes you so much more aware of those things and just appreciating how detailed everything is and how beautiful everything is. So anyways.
Attention restoration, baby.
Heck yeah. And that meditative movement, because it's not just about what I'm observing with my eyes, it's somewhat that, but it's also like the way it feels to breathe, like the sensations in my body, the rocks under my feet. It's all of those things. So
it's beautiful.
I feel like I got a little off track here, but one more thing that I wanted to mention is that I think sometimes we talk about these types of things as an escape. And I just wanted to express that it is an escape, but for me it's not an escape from, but an escape to. And I feel like that's just the way that I want to think about it, because we have talked so many times about how when we go out there, we feel like that's more real life than this.
Right.
This being like society. So
It makes sense to our soul in a way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it does probably go back to all those theories of like this innate connection that we have. But, they're theories, but I feel them out there.
Again, I just really love this sweet spot of where kind of my spiritual practice almost is what I'm talking about here. Close to that is backed up by science. And I love that so much. It just really tickles me right now.
Me too. I did just want to point out an important flip side in case maybe some folks listen and this doesn't resonate at all. Maybe you've had some hiking experiences that weren't great or that didn't really give you any of these benefits. And so like that's valid too. Not all nature is going to feel restorative and not every experience is going to feel restorative. I think that it also needs to be a natural environment that you feel comfortable in. Mm. So the opposite of biophilia is biophobia.
Okay.
And that could be very specific or it could be broad, but some environments or even just elements of environments have the ability to create fear and discomfort instead of restoration and calm. So I think you need to be gentle with yourself too, and maybe not, again, going back to expectations, think that like, oh, I'm going to run out there. Maybe preparing would help you feel more safe, or maybe there's a certain environment out in nature that feels safer than another, but that is a legitimate aspect of it.
That's a great point.
I did come across a study that kind of pointed out that the fear of nature or aspects of nature do seem to usually involve human interference or influence rather than a direct connection. Mm-hmm. And so going back to community, you are more likely to have or develop a positive relationship with nature if you're in the company of other humans who have a positive relationship with nature. So I didn't really know where else that information could land, but I did feel like it was kind of a good thing to consider, especially if you maybe, like, nature hasn't been a huge part of your life from earlier on or at all. It could be scary initially.
Absolutely. And a lot of people aren't really exposed to it. So it would be completely new. So I, might suggest to start small.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong, like what we were talking about earlier, just passive time in a natural area. You don't really have to do anything.
Right.
Just sit and see what happens. So we really can't talk about hiking, our own experiences, and the benefits of spending time in nature without addressing the fact that not everyone has accessibility to these things.
Yeah, I definitely need to acknowledge my privilege because I have ample natural spaces right outside my door, so it's very easy and natural for me to talk about these things.
Right, to just be able to spend that time and without much prior planning or whatnot. So, like Katy's saying, some people face geographic challenges when it comes to spending time in natural areas. We've talked quite a bit about like natural versus urban areas. Well, a lot of people that live in these urban areas really just, it's not accessible for them. It's just really not available. And I think coupled with that is that a lot of people don't have the income. To maybe buy gear or maybe even to travel to a place where they, would be able to immerse themselves in nature. So income is pretty much always going to be somewhat of a prohibitive factor. I would like to think that, spending time in nature and hiking and whatnot is a pretty inexpensive activity. And it is.
If you can get there.
Right. Provided you have these other factors going in your favor as well.
Right. I know. Obviously, I'd love to encourage everyone to go find somewhere to touch grass or take a walk, but I do recognize that it's not always possible to step outside and get these benefits that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But I do just want to say that that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have hope or that you can't connect with nature at all. There are things that you can kind of do to bring nature to you. And I don't want to get too far into this, but you can find information on different ways to kind of like organize your living space and different things to make nature feel a little more accessible. But I will say one of the biggest things you could do if you're able to get yourself some indoor plants, they can increase reported happiness up to 78%. They can increase reported positive health outcomes by 65% and energy by up to 76%.
Wow.
So that's a big thing you can do for yourself. If you can get yourself a little plant baby, you can still get a little bit of benefit of feeling connected to nature. Also, if it's possible for you to kind of organize your space that makes the most of your natural lighting, we talked about sunshine. So, it's not as much, but I still feel like if it's not as easy for you to go out to nature, maybe you can bring bits of nature to you and just really be more mindful about trying to connect with those bits.
I love that. I feel like we can't have a conversation about accessibility without talking about minorities and people of color and challenges they specifically face that the rest of us may not. And these factors such as geographic, income, they may disproportionately affect people of color.
Yeah.
Already. So that's already going to be some obstacles that some folks would have to, overcome just to gain accessibility. I think that it's worth noting that people of color, unfortunately, aren't represented well in the outdoor recreation world.
No.
Our national institutions here in the United States, our park systems, all these things were historically racist and segregated. So although they may not be now, these things can have a lasting impact. People of color, from my, research, report feeling often unsafe and, experience prejudice perhaps when they do try to spend time in Mother Nature. And, let's face it, outdoor recreation is really marketed and targeted for white people. We see it all the time. So it's not exactly the most welcoming space for people of color. And again, I'm no expert, and we want to provide you guys with some resources to look into this and to have direct information, because we're just trying to maybe pass the message along a little bit, but we're certainly not experts.
I do think that it's a super important part of the conversation, but I also recognize that I lack, the experience or the knowledge to really expound on it. Mm-hmm. So I do feel like a good way for us to advocate for a shift in this is just to really share the resources and give you a way to find people who have way more authority to speak on it. So we will definitely do that. One person in particular that I wanted to just kind of share some of what her work is and what she's doing is Beth Collier. She's based out of the UK, and I read some of her work, but I also kind of listened to her being interviewed along with a panel, and I will link that podcast. But anyway, she has done quite a lot of ethnographic research that focuses primarily on people of color in outdoor spaces. So she has found that there seems to be, as Sam mentioned, this common sense of not belonging or not feeling welcome in nature, and sometimes not even feeling safe or comfortable in these spaces, which she found an interesting contrast, because in their countries of heritage, they seem to be very deeply connected to nature, like sometimes even in a spiritual sense.
Yes.
So the West and Western culture does seem to have had an impact. This research is super broad, and I couldn't put everything down, but something I found interesting, a very generalized reason that she offered behind this is that in terms of migration, there's kind of this theme of leaving behind something that's hard, like a more difficult lifestyle, and that you're moving towards something that's more developed or viewed as maybe a more affluent lifestyle with more technological advances, maybe a more progressive type life. And so the shift towards this, especially more urbanized lifestyle, lessens the connection with nature. And over time, beyond just lessening that connection, it almost seems to like recategorize it as something that's other or strange or like not desirable, really. So I found that very interesting. She did also just kind of point out the irony in how Western culture is now very focused on researching the health benefits of nature, because other cultures have for years kind of told us these things and warned of the harmful effects of living in the way that we do, as far as this increase in urbanization, deforestation, kind of overall prioritizing industry over sustainability, just what we consider a progressive way of living, I suppose. And so, I don't know, she just kind of felt like it was a little bit ironic that we are studying all these health benefits now when we should have maybe been focusing on the harmful effects of the ways that we were choosing to live and progress as a society. So yeah, I'm not going to go too much more into that, but I found her work very fascinating. I particularly loved listening to her speak because she was just one of those people who has such a calming, quiet voice and, I don't know, just this intelligence that shines through. And so I'm definitely going to link everything on her that I found, but I really enjoyed her work. Like I said, she's based out of the UK, but there are other organizations here in the US that we're going to provide some information for as well.
That's totally fascinating to think about. And I see it, you know, in most all our more modern cultures of like this idea that, you know, in a way that's what's more natural, what's more simple is bad. And
Right.
what's more modern, what's further away from the earth, less natural is good. And I do think we're starting to like realize, no, that was wrong.
Yeah.
Even though we've like built our world upon that idea for the last 75 years or so, which is why we're in a lot of the mess that we are in. But isn't it also just hope-giving in a way that perhaps a lot of the healing that we're needing as a society is just right here under our feet? It's our Mother Earth, you know?
Yeah.
This is kind of beautiful. And I hope it's kind of scary too, because I'm afraid not enough people will wake up.
Yeah, and something that scares me a little bit too is I feel like we're always trying to find cheats. So I hope that this research is used in the right way and that it's not all about like, oh, well, we'll put on a virtual reality headset and get these benefits. Because that was a thought that kind of crept across my mind a little bit. And I would like to think that people will be like, no, we need actual nature. But I could see people trying to cheat it a little bit.
Right. Or kind of almost like start to realize that this trend of like moving towards nature to find healing is happening. So let's privatize it. Let's commodify it. Exactly. Because that's not going to work. I feel like that's not going to be as effective if we make Mother Nature a commodity for sale. Yeah. In a way. You know, I don't know. I hope we have better sense than that. But...
Me too. I want to believe in us. I really do.
I know. I used to. It's terrible.
We've been talking about all this super positive stuff, and now we're like, oh, there's no hope for humanity. See, we need to go hiking.
I know, we do.
So hopefully we are heading in the right direction. There are a lot of very promising programs, practices, or even just concepts that are developing as a result of all of these studies.
True.
So that's hopeful.
Yeah, it is. I found an article that was super interesting. It was talking about how environmental activists use hiking as kind of a self-preservation habit in order to return back to their work, in order like to persist in their fight for their causes. And I wasn't surprised by that, but I just wonder how many other disciplines would find time spent stepping away from their work, their cause, intentional time spent in nature. And I just wonder how much that could benefit in so many different fields and discipline, like of the job that they do and that they want to do when they return to their regular lives or whatever. Yeah. I just thought that was interesting, like specifically like using it though for healing and for persistence, inspiration, really. So just kind of interesting.
Yeah, it kind of ties back to that whole like how it actually creates balance in our brain, and a balanced brain is more productive, like in a work sense and sense of a purpose. Right. So I don't know. I can't help but wonder, who wouldn't benefit. But anyway, I just want to say it seems that outdoor behavioral therapy is just becoming increasingly more common and popular. So there are just a plethora of wilderness programs, especially for youth, that, as I talked about earlier, have been shown to possibly be not only more effective than treatment as usual, but also costless. And I read an interesting study about how using more outdoor therapies
would cost like society much less as far as in terms of like healthcare costs.
That's interesting.
Society tends to eat. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I came across wilderness programs too, and something that stood out to me was just that there was a man on a podcast I listened to, and he was a therapist for one of these programs. And he did kind of specifically say that it wasn't the program itself that helped the kids, but that it was the nature, that they facilitate the space, but that the wilderness did the healing.
I love that.
And I thought that was so cool. It was really promising or really hopeful to hear.
Beautiful statement. Yeah, and I also just wanted to touch on too, I mean, there's tons of wilderness programs for kids, especially out there. Lots of treatment options. I would suggest doing diligent research. I think we've all probably heard of some horror stories of these types of places, and parents send their kids there for a variety of reasons. So I'm sure none of our listeners would send their children to one of these places for a nefarious reason, but do be careful if you're choosing something, especially for your child, that, you know, you might not have contact or whatnot with them. Do your research. Make sure they're well accredited and ran by professionals and have good reviews and all that such type thing before you let your kid loose with them in the woods.
I wish that didn't have to be said, but
it does.
I had it on my notes too.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. That's sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
So there's also a lot of nature schools popping up for kids, which are pretty much exactly what they sound like. They're school that's entirely outside.
Love that.
I say popping up all over the place. I do want to acknowledge again, they're not accessible everywhere. Maybe over time that will change. I will say there's a ton of resources out there that could actually help you start your own nature school if you should feel called to do that in your area. I actually was listening to a podcast. As you can tell, I've become obsessed with podcasts. I need to calm down. But anyway, they were talking about nature school, and it was funny because they opened the podcast by saying, like, don't feel like you have to start your own. And I immediately was like, well, I want to start one. What is it? Tell me what it is. I'll start. And I did just love it. I'm not going to go on and on about it. You can I'm going to link all the resources, but it just sounded like such an amazing way for kids to learn and grow.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I think a fairly recent trend that kind of shows how they're trying to put these benefits in practice is that doctors are actually writing nature prescriptions now. So you might get a prescription written from a doctor, you know, telling you to spend 120 minutes a week outside or something like that. In 2013, Park RX, which was a new program in the United States, was established. And what Park RX does is help doctors to identify how to encourage patients to spend more time in nature, and that includes writing prescriptions such as that.
That's really cool.
I also just wanted to mention an organization that I like the looks of and I read quite a bit about, and it's called Hike for Mental Health. Basically, their mission is to raise funds for mental health research and also for trail preservation. If you are a hiker, you can actually, I don't know how you would put this, but kind of like crowdsource your friends and family if you are doing big hikes and whatnot, and raise money for an organization like Hike for Mental Health while you're hiking. Like you can kind of set it up like per miles, do some different things for people if they choose to donate, which I think is really cool. So check out Hike for Mental Health. They're a highly rated nonprofit organization.
I also just wanted to say, like, when it comes to ecotherapy or nature therapy, we've been a little more hiking focused in this podcast, of course, but these therapies are super broad. So a few that I came across was ones that are more horticultural or gardening based, where you're kind of learning to cultivate growth. There's walk and talk based therapies where your sessions outdoors and mobile. And then there's even some that are kind of focused more on letting nature inspire the creation of art or poetry. Ooh. So, you know, there's a little bit of something for everybody, and some of them kind of combine all of the above or other.
I want to do all of them.
Seriously. And I did just want to share that one of my favorite sources I came across, his name is Stephen McCabe. He has Nature Therapy Online, where he provides a free ebook. And that's kind of why I wanted to mention him. You can just download it and you can kind of work through it. It talks a little bit about ecotherapy in general, but I think he also gives you some exercises that you can do for yourself.
I'm going to check that out.
And then he also has a podcast. And if you like podcasts, I recommend listening to it. I found him to be absolutely delightful.
Aww.
And he has a dog that kind of like makes noise throughout. But as he says, he doesn't edit his episodes. He just lets them flow. So you get to hear his little interactions with his dog. And honestly, it just makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
Aww,
so
that's so
I
cool.
will link him in the description, but highly recommend.
If we didn't edit our episodes, you guys would hate it.
Seriously. You would never listen.
No.
That's assuming that you are.
Yeah.
Look, I've seen a few numbers. There's a handful of you out there, and we thank you.
We love you, and we thank you.
So to wrap it up, I wanted to talk a little bit about nature deficit disorder, which is a phrase coined by Richard Louv. He wrote the book Last Child in the Woods. I wanted to touch on this because I'm reading it currently, and there were a few things that stood out to me. I'm honestly not that far in it, but I'm already super excited by everything. So I really had to make an effort not to make all of my notes just be about that book. But anyway, just kind of going back to children specifically, we tend to think of technology as being sort of the main culprit for kids' disconnection with the outdoors, and it definitely plays a role. It's distracting, it shortens attention span, and I just feel like kids are less capable of entertaining themselves than they used to be.
Yes.
I also feel like they're constantly told that tech is where the jobs are, so it kind of makes sense that they end up focusing their attention there. But he zeroed in on other factors, especially increasing urbanization and the disappearance of natural spaces. He has a chapter in particular called The Criminalization of Natural Play, and this was the main thing that I wanted to talk about. So in this chapter, he discusses the rise of community associations from about 10,000 in 1970 to 286,000 at the time that he was writing the book.
Wow.
So these associations are constantly creating more rules. Depending on where you're at, they may be mildly intrusive or they may be very over the top.
Yeah. Very intrusive.
I'm sure we've all heard of horror stories. And because more than 57 million children live in areas that are ruled by condominium, cooperative, or homeowners associations, they're definitely feeling the impact. So he's drawing the connection between these regulations and the ability of children to naturally play. So for example, things common in earlier generations, like mine, so like building tree houses, climbing trees, playing in streams, fishing in ponds, these things are increasingly cracked down on. So tree houses now are either fire hazards or they violate zoning laws. And as a side note, when I was reading this, I'm just like, what kind of person tears down a child's tree house?
Right.
I don't want to derail, but come on.
I know people that live in these communities that have these horribly intrusive HOAs and neighbors, and I just can't imagine that because I have not experienced this. But I hear horror stories and it just blows my mind. Anyway,
who does that to a kid?
That's crazy.
But also, of course, rising environmental concerns have had a huge impact on some of the other things. So if I think about being a kid playing around in streams, moving rocks, for example. Mm-hmm. He talked to a lot of different children. One story that stood out to me was when he talked to a 12-year-old girl who loved climbing trees. So she was yelled at when she was in a tree by a grown man. I think the first time this happened, she was 7 years old, so she was terrified of him. But as she got older, she grew resentful at these adults who were trying to keep her from being free, in her words. Tell him. So I do want to say that he's not making light of the environmental concerns. He does recognize that if we want to keep coexisting with nature and other creatures, that we're going to have to, that those things are important.
Right.
But he also points out that poor land use decisions resulting in the reduction of accessible nature does far more environmental damage than a child playing. We're not going to go into statistics, but hundreds of thousands of acres of forest have been and continue to be lost to farmland. And as our open space shrinks, the overuse is increasing. And that's not the kids' fault. Right. Let's be honest.
Right.
So he goes on to talk about how free-range play is being replaced with structured sports, and how even though there's high level of engagement in sports, it still is not enough or the same, that children are still overwhelmingly more sedentary and spend the majority of their time indoors. And so this fact is kind of alarming in light of the ever-expanding body of research, a lot of which we've already discussed, but basically indicating how essential direct exposure to nature is for children, for their physical and emotional health. So exposure to nature has been linked to the reduction of the symptoms of ADHD and the improvement of children's cognitive abilities, as Sam mentioned earlier, and resistance to negative stresses and depression. I also wanted to mention that he does point out that even though we would assume that these stats are different for rural children, they're actually not. Like, despite them having easier access, rural kids aren't getting outside as much either, which I also found very interesting. Mm-hmm. So anyways, as I was reading this, even though I don't have kids of my own, I just really felt like we need to be doing a better job at finding long-term solutions to the environmental issues, because I truly believe that children need safe, natural spaces, not only to play, but to develop the type of love and ownership that will grow them into conscientious adults who actually care about the preservation of those natural spaces.
Yes.
So, you know, yelling at a kid for climbing a tree or playing in a stream or building a tree fort not only scares them and discourages them from the type of play that's going to develop this love of nature, it's kind of just teaching them that environmentalists are mean.
It's so true.
So anyway, I just think we can find better ways to promote environmentalism. I think that education is super important, but I think that having a personal sense of connection and responsibility is every bit as important as education. So trying to cultivate that in children and the next generation is one of the best things that we can do for our planet. And so I don't know. That just really, like I said, I don't have kids, but that really stood out to me. I guess maybe I'm always kind of preparing for how I want to raise my future children, if there are any. And so, I don't know. I just think we can do a better job. Mm-hmm. And not, you know, the homeowners associations are crazy. But I do feel like some environmentalists get a little bit extreme as well. And it's like, it's hard to say anything because I 100% believe in trying to make better choices for our environment. But the children are suffering. And it's not an aspect I had thought about, really.
And isn't it funny how often the people that are trying to do good, their message is really lost in their terrible delivery.
Right.
You know, it's like people that are working towards good causes are kind of insufferable sometimes.
I know.
Not across the board.
Right.
But I think when people are hateful or condescending, that's a big one, insulting, all of these things, no one listens to your message anymore.
Right.
Right. So if you're just so quick just to tell someone that they're wrong or what their kids are doing are wrong and the way that everybody has been raised is just wrong, you know, they may have some truth in what they're saying, but no one's going to listen to you anymore.
I know. And I also just feel like we have to find a balance somewhere, because in order for kids to love nature, they have to be able to go play in nature. Like, we just went through this entire episode talking about the benefits, and especially in the formative years. But yet they're like not allowed to do any of that stuff now.
Which is crazy, because when we're talking about environmental impact, the thought that like children are somehow responsible for any of it is just freaking laughable to me. Because, you know, the damage that's happening to our environment is, I'll just say, not kids. I don't want to get into like a whole thing.
The thing is, we've been making poor choices for generations now. And we need to be making better ones.
And I mean, let's just be honest. Corporations are behind a lot of our problems.
Right.
And not that I'm like calling for abolishing corporations, but let's be honest that pollution, a lot of these types of things are driven by business, not by children playing. So that's hilarious. To me, how ridiculous
maybe we need to be reevaluating how we do agriculture in this country before we're going to yell at a kid for building a tree house.
Right. Or how we get rid of our waste.
Yeah.
Different things. So I think that that's a really wonderful add-on, Katie, that you included there. And I have heard about this book quite a bit, and it came up on a lot of my research, but I hope that, I don't know if you bought the book, but if you did, when you're done reading it, I would love to borrow it. Thank you.
I also just like that phrase, I gotta say, nature deficit disorder.
I'm going to say that's what's wrong with me when next time I'm in a terrible mood.
It's either PMS or nature deficit disorder, or both at once.
Yeah, it's probably both. So, you know, today we've just really been exploring this amazing ability of Mother Nature to provide treatment and prevention for mental non-well-being, I should say. And that, in a way, is kind of unlike any other treatment method, that it does provide preventative but also treatment. Exercise is kind of along the similar vein. Of course, it's kind of one and the same of what we're talking about. So it is unique, spending time in nature, exercising in nature, it is unique that it does offer benefits in a way that nothing else really does. On that line of thought, though, we are not encouraging anyone to just drop their treatment plan, stop taking medication, stop seeing a doctor, whatever it is, and just go out hiking and thinking that it's going to heal you or solve your stuff or get you back on an even keel. We're not saying that.
No.
Please don't do that. If this conversation is resonating with you, maybe you're already in treatment, please talk to your provider about it. Do not take our advice as medical or professional.
Because we are not.
No, we are not. But I will encourage you to just consider how nature could possibly fit into your current lifestyle or your current treatment plan as is, and just give it some thought.
Yeah.
And start small. Start there.
It could be another tool in your toolkit.
Absolutely. Finally, I just want to say to anyone out there that's really struggling, having a hard time in finding purpose and seeing the point of tomorrow, first of all, I hope you know that you're not alone. So many of us have been through time periods and experiences feeling that kind of way. I know you may feel very alone, but you are not. Please never hesitate to reach out for help. I know shame is a very heavy suitcase to carry, but there's no shame in finding yourself important enough to get help. And I hope, I encourage that you all please reach out and don't become one of these statistics. If you find yourself experiencing suicide ideation or extreme emotional distress, there is a national hotline. You can just dial 988 and you can talk to someone as much and as long as you need, and they will be there for you, and I just hope everybody stays safe and stays healthy. And it kind of ends on a sad note, but I felt like it was important to mention that you're worth it, whoever you are out there. So don't be ashamed to get help.
Yes. Wow. Wow. That was a lot.
It was a lot.
That's a lot of stuff.
Is that it?
I think that's it. That's all she wrote, y'all. Just kidding. That's not all she wrote. There is a lot more written out there. We'll link all of the sources that we used, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, really.
It really is. But I hope we've given you guys a bit of a solid knowledge base here about the research is out there. Nature is good for your mental health.
What was it? Urban isn't bad, but nature is better.
Right. Sorry, guys, but
no hate to our urban.
No,
our urban peeps.
To our well-being, it's just how it is. And I think that there's space within urban areas to create these green spaces too. It just takes intention, and it takes a recognition and less greed and things like that.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic.
We'll go from super positive to feeling hopeless about humanity.
I know. Let's not do that.
Just kidding. We're not going to do that. We're going to go hiking.
Yeah.
Soon.
And hopefully we'll be giving you guys a report right on the trail very soon, because we're ready. We're itching and we're ready.
All right. Yeah. As always, you can get a hold of us on social media, send us an email. We link all of the ways to reach us in our notes.
Yeah, so check that out and send us a line anytime. And otherwise, I guess I shall leave you guys alone now.
Happy February!
Bye-bye! hope you guys are having a lovely winter. It's starting to move on into spring. I feel like I always give a weather report. I don't know why, but
I'll also try not to lean into it too much.
we just can't move.
Don't sit here like this.
I know.
I can't breathe. Sorry. I'm just like reading your notes from over here. Cough break.
Roll that back because I feel like I'm shitting words out my mouth. Okay.
System.
Please.
Okay.
I love you barreling. No, that's not what I meant to say. Wrong. I believe in nature. I just don't believe in others sometimes. But, I mean, not like my loved ones, but I digress.
Sorry.
Hi, puppy.
Dog break.
No.